Great to have you all in the Zoom room today. Thanks for joining. I want to start by welcoming our newest Platt agent, John. You're going to give a virtual wave. It's always great to meet agents face to face. Hopefully, John, you're going to get a chance to meet a lot of our agents in the near future face to face, but this is not too bad of a replacement to meet some of our folks. So John actually just officially transferred to us this afternoon. So hopefully you get a chance to connect with him in the near future. Welcome, John. Good to have you.
Thank you very much.
So I'm going to hit on a couple things at the front end of our call. So just a reminder, at about 3:45, we'll transition to taking a look at a couple of the sections of Shift, and our own Crystal White is going to lead conversation today on that. Thank you very much, Crystal, for being willing to do that. Hopefully y'all have continued to enjoy that book. I'm going to start by highlighting something that we talked a little bit about this last week. Rex sent out an email to the brokerage on Friday. And I want to hit on this for a moment because it's something you all on. And, you know, I often, when I'm talking with particularly potential clients, I will say, I don't think our industry is defined by numbers. So, however, I think what we get to do in our service with clients, if we're good at that, if we're providing good service that's valuable, that's appreciated, and people trust us, eventually that is reflected in numbers. There are ways that you can measure, does the consumer feel about our service like we feel about our service? So if we think we're doing a good job, does the public? And numbers is one of the ways to measure that. So they do matter. They're not the driver, but they do matter. And sometimes there's numbers that are worth celebrating for individuals and for companies. And I want to reiterate something that Rex sent out on Friday, just to point out how significant this is. So there's all sorts of numbers that you can look at, and we generally look at Indianapolis market share as kind of a key indicator for us as a company. And when I say Indianapolis, I do mean Indianapolis. In terms of city address, right? Like an actual Indianapolis address. I don't mean the region. But in terms of Indianapolis market share and then growth of companies. So we're not necessarily so concerned about size as much as, is our average agent production going up? Is our average agent growing? Are they improving in their business? And then as a company, are we growing? So Indianapolis market share and then growth as a company. And guys, at the end of April, as Rex and I were looking at the numbers, we have more to celebrate and point out at the end of April 2020 than we have ever had at the end of a month. And given the circumstances, it's always a big deal, but it's particularly a very big deal right now. And I'll highlight just a couple things in narrative form that are about the numbers. The first is that if you're looking at Indianapolis market share and travel back in time with me for a moment to 2017. So fiscal year January to December of 2017, in terms of Indianapolis market share, we were the 11th largest company. okay, of Indianapolis market share. Fast forward to 2020, and year to date, we are the fourth largest company in Indianapolis market share. Where this gets really interesting is that the month of March and particularly the month of April, the trending data would suggest that we will likely finish the year as the second largest Indianapolis market share company. Y'all know who the Evil Empire is, which kidding. Evil Empire, what people call the Yankees, if you're a sports fan. So I have a lot of respect for FC Tucker. They do a lot of things well. So make sure you quote me on that later. So they're kind of the giant, the 100-year-old company, and actually have a fairly large market share compared to everybody else. But to project out right now, given what March and April looked like, for Platt to become the second largest market share Indianapolis company in 2020 is a huge deal. And in the month of April, we were actually second by a fairly wide margin for the month of April, for that 30-day stretch, which, look, that's not the driver, but what that says to us is that all of the value that you're providing to each other, encouragement, positive mentality, kind of doing the right things, it's bearing fruit. Like the seeds that are getting planted, they're growing. And that's a big deal. And we're actually looking at May and June right now, and it doesn't show any signs of changing. In other words, companies that are shrinking in market share year to date in the month of April appear to do the same thing in May, and not a whole lot of data out there for June right now. And our trend continues to go up. So the amount of business that we're projecting to close in May right now, I just got off the phone with a banker friend of mine, and probably same as you, right? We're getting this question: how's the real estate business? How's the real estate business? I get it multiple times every day, which is great, because then I'm able to kind of brag on the company a little bit and say, let me tell you how many transactions it looks like we're going to close in May. Let me tell you how many we closed in April. Let me tell you how many it looks like we're going to close in May. And I'm not, I don't want this to come across as therefore nothing bad is happening. Like, there's lots of things to be concerned about right now, both in terms of public health and in terms of the economy and unemployment. So this isn't like stick your head in the sand because we had a good April. But I also think, like, hey, in the middle of that, if there's something to celebrate and kind of pat each other on the back on, we should do that. And we're really grateful for it. But I would say, way to go. Congratulations. We're working on putting together a graphic that we're going to put out to you guys that, if you think it's appropriate to share in some setting, that's up to your discretion. Our intent is to just do kind of one clear graphic that demonstrates our company's growth over the last couple of years, in particular to what does 2020 project to. So way to go. That's the big measure there. I think a second one that is just as significant, we don't see necessarily quite this big jump in April in this second measure, but average agent production. This is something that matters a lot to us, and I'll give you kind of a framework here. It's not uncommon in our industry for brokerages or offices that produce a lot of real estate to have a very top-heavy production, meaning you have an office or a company, say, of 100 agents, where 90% of the company's production comes from 5, 6, 7, 8 realtors, right? So kind of the 80-20 rule, but even more imbalanced than that. That is not uncommon. That is kind of the old school real estate balance, is that a lot of production from a few people. which there's nothing wrong with that. Right? There's always going to be people that, for any number of reasons, manage to produce a lot of real estate, and that's to be congratulated. And we have some high producers, right? Some of you. But as a company, we always have as a value that we want to make sure we're passing along support and power and leverage to do more business to everyone in the company. And so we really like this measure of average agent production. And then in particular, how many agents do we have? What percentage of our agents are beating their last year's production? And then how many are at these kind of key thresholds of somewhere in the ballpark of $2 or $3 million of production a year? Is really that, if you could imagine the breakdown between what's the number that allows an agent to kind of make it, right? What's that average annual? Well, it's going to be different for all of us, but that is a really important thing for us. And as we look right now at the diversification of the amount of business that our company's doing, it's super encouraging, right? So we didn't gain all of that market share through top producers. We didn't. We actually gained that market share through people transitioning into the industry and closing their first $1 or $2 million of real estate, which we all know is really hard. Your first million's your hardest million. And we gained that share through people going from that kind of $1 or $2 million to a $3 or $4 or $5 million annual pace. And it's just really great. I think it shows people are working hard and what they're investing in is working. So those two things are worth celebrating. Way to go. You'll see a graphic coming out probably later this week from us that you can use if you have the right context to do that. Before I hand off, I'm going to hand it off to Rex in a moment and ask him to share a little bit about some things that he's seeing in the industry. I want to circle back. We've obviously had a lot of conversation about what does being out in public and doing business right now look like, particularly in light of new communication from our mayor and our governor on Thursday evening and Friday afternoon of last week. So there has been statewide some loosening of restrictions. And I commented to somebody the other day that my parents and a lot of my friends live in Richmond, a town about an hour east of here. And it kind of struck me that I got the impression that business in Richmond is much more quickly going like back to normal than it is in Indianapolis, because we're a much denser community. We have a much higher rate of infection and deaths here right now in Indianapolis. And our mayor has given additional direction from what the governor has given us, which is not the case in other parts of the state. And so I want to reiterate that while we are encouraged by what the governor and mayor said late last week, there are still several things that aren't business as usual. And so just to be very clear, a couple of examples that we want to highlight. Number one, still should not be doing open houses. I haven't seen anyone in Indianapolis doing open houses. If they are, they shouldn't be. So that's kind of clear. We're still at that level of discretion. Number two, same thing that we said last week about closings. When this changes, we will certainly put out communication, but agents don't need to be attending closings right now, and that we should do everything we can to avoid multiple people being in the same room if it's not necessary. And then the third is, we've had a couple questions about this, about showings. If you are out showing property, which you're very much allowed to do, right? Prior to the showing, we would ask, and we think this is just best practice right now, do everything you can to reduce the number of showings, not by being unavailable or by discouraging your clients, but just utilize technology. As much as you can, utilize technology, be creative, to try to, and if you can whittle down 6 showings to 4 showings, great. Good job. I think you did best practice. Maybe you whittle 10 down to 2. So it just depends on the client and the circumstance, but I would start with that. And then the other thing is that when you're showing property, you as an agent should be wearing a mask. We haven't, as a brokerage on a call, addressed this specific thing, and we've gotten a couple questions about this. I'm not aware of a direction from a government entity that would 100% require us as realtors to wear masks while in a house for a showing. But right now, I don't think that matters. I think it's responsible. I think it's considerate to the owner of that property. So as an FYI, I did actually get communication last night from a listing agent, not a plat agent, trying to get clarity. It appears that one of our agents showed a property and wasn't wearing a mask. And this isn't, I'm not trying to shame or guilt anybody. That's not the point of this. But it caused me to realize, like, oh, we should really communicate very clearly about this. That because you are in someone else's property, I think the question of, is this a necessity medically or is this a necessity legally, doesn't even have to come into play. It's just best practice. And so for right now, I think you need to be doing this. If your client is uncomfortable wearing the mask, I will admit that there's a little bit more attention to that. I would ask them to personally, because I think it's the considerate thing to do for the owner of the property. I'm a little bit less inclined to say your client needs to be wearing a mask. So, because you can control what you do, right? So, anybody want to comment or ask a question? I know I'm potentially opening up a can of worms here. Yeah, thanks, Jenny. I should clarify. I don't think this is the only good precaution to take. Yes, removing shoes, wearing individual booties, individual meaning like new that you're taking with you, wearing gloves, certainly if you're on the listing side or you're the owner, sanitizing. I mean, I think, and NAR and IAR and MIBOR have all published really good guidelines about this that I think we should be following all of these. So yes, yes, yes. I think the mask is the one that, from what I have gathered, it's the one that someone's going to be the most likely to not do. And it's also the one that now on a couple of occasions we've gotten some feedback that it's important to homeowners, and maybe we've gotten some pushback on it. So that's the only reason I was bringing that one up specifically. But yeah, thanks for the clarifying questions. Okay. Someday we're going to look back on this and say, remember when we wore masks to show houses? And I mean, maybe we can kind of chuckle at it. The mask that I'm using right now is for sure too small for my face. I have a large head and a large face. So I have a normal size mask, and y'all, it's hilarious. I need to get a bigger one because if I try to talk, no one can hear me at all. So I was in an occupied property yesterday with a mask on, with a tenant who was asking me questions, and I could not understand a word that I was saying. And I just laugh at it, right? Like, hey, this is the world we're living in right now. You got to be able to roll with it. I think that's all from me. Feel free to post on that topic if you want us to circle back to it. We're happy to. I've asked Rex to share a little bit of his perspective on some of that recent company growth that I'm referencing. In particular, also referencing, Rex will do a better job of saying this than me, but a trend that we see developing right now in our marketplace, not plat specific, but just in terms of is business going up or down? What's transaction count look like? And who's doing the transactions that are out there? So Rex, take it away. After Rex, I think we'll hit pause and move on to Crystal. So fire away.
Thanks, Mark. So I had sent out an email on Friday with some numbers about how the top 10 brokerages in Indian and all of MIBOR had fared in the month of April compared to a year ago. And I took away from that that sometimes I frame that up in a way that might not be the most digestible. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what I'm seeing, within Platt and within the context of the industry. For starting March 1st to today, we have effectively had the same amount of business transact in Indianapolis. We have had fewer agents transact that business. As a matter of fact, we have had a 20% reduction in the number of agents over that time who did $500,000 in volume. So what we're seeing as you move that up to those who did $1 million over that time is you're seeing about half of that. And as I dig into the numbers more, what I'm seeing is you're having a smaller number of agents transact the same amount of business. And I think what we're seeing here, and I believe we saw this to some degree in 08, 09, is that those agents and those brokerages that continue to find the way that the market is shifting and continue to engage their clients and help lead them through a process that isn't necessarily as known anymore. Like, nobody's sitting at home right now telling their kids, let me tell you about the time we looked for a house the last time a pandemic rolled through, and so it's an unknown. But what we're seeing is those that adapt and have the discipline to stay at it have a greater opportunity to produce gain. And what's happening is that's actually ramping up Platt's growth in the industry. And that's what I saw in April. And what I think I'm continuing to see into May is we have a much greater number of agents as a total percentage of the brokerage who are staying in the game and continuing to go to work and staying flexible within this market and getting the work done, right? And it's produced, we look at the numbers and guys, there is no way that a brokerage our size should be able to outgain FC Tucker, Century 21, Keller Williams, RE/MAX, you name it. Like, that shouldn't happen. And there's a tremendous opportunity within this that I don't know we've ever had, at least in my time as a realtor. And there are several of you who have been a realtor longer than I have. But if we continue to do the work and we continue to lead our clients to value and stay flexible to the way the market is changing right now, what the numbers are telling us is that we have a greater opportunity in this time than we necessarily had beforehand. We have less competition. We have the same amount of business out there. Less competition, same amount of business out there. So if we continue to execute, and if we continue to communicate our narratives and validating fear, like, the feelings are valid, fear is a valid feeling, but we continue to communicate the honest narratives of hope and the paths to getting where people are trying to go, we will continue to see tremendous, unprecedented growth. And I don't know. I don't know that I've ever seen the opportunity or a brokerage collectively, pun intended, like step into this the way that you all are. And so I wanted to kind of give some context to the numbers I sent out Friday within that, because it isn't just in a. I can't tell you what June and July look like. I don't know. But right now, today, what I'm seeing is we have a greater opportunity, and we are executing within that opportunity to a greater degree of success, while our competition is not. And I can give you all sorts of numbers and facts and whatnot in that, but I will spare you that for this call. But guys, we are in an awesome time in the history of Indianapolis to be able to do some pretty profound work at a time where there aren't many stepping up to do it in the ways where the ultimate value lies. So that's what I was running through with Mark, what I wanted to share with you all. Love to hear any questions you have about that, either in this call or in another one-on-one conversation. But I just could not be more excited or proud or about where we are, and and to be doing it with y'all. This is fantastic.
That's good stuff, Rex. One of the things I'd highlight there, guys, just to reiterate something Rex said. Right now, year to date, one key thing there, our industry has a similar number of transactions and dollar volume that it has in year past, but a fewer number of agents and brokerages are conducting those deals. And I think that doesn't fit the, if you kind of could take a survey and said, okay, realtors, don't look in the BLC, don't look at a market report, what's happening? I don't think many people would get that right. And I think some of that's because we're so, as an industry, there's just so much division, right? We're very flat in terms of an industry. There's tens of thousands of realtors, right, in one marketplace. So in another industry where you would have fewer players, it would be more obvious. If the number of people conducting business started to go down, you would notice it right away, right? When there's thousands and thousands, you don't feel that. This isn't something that any of us could anecdotally observe, but it's a really significant trend, in that there are some businesses shrinking, but there are also some businesses growing, and that our marketplace is not shrinking. And actually, depending on second half of the year, this year could turn out to be even higher transaction count wise than last year. Obviously, lots of unknowns, like Rex said. We don't know what July 4th is going to look like. But I don't think that's necessarily something that you're going to take to a listing presentation, right? But I think it does help to formulate what is the opportunity that exists right now for an agent that takes a positive attitude and like pursues opportunity. The opportunity is not going down, and I think there's a convincing case that the opportunity is actually going up. That's a great question, Dave. Dave asked if we've looked at the average volume per Platt agent versus the average volume per Tucker agent. This year, I have not looked at that number. I have looked at that number in the past. Our average agent production was higher than the average Tucker agent. And I would assume it is this year, though I haven't looked at it. Tucker's production, it kind of fits that stereotypical mold of very top heavy. It's a 1,500 agent company. And they have a lot of producers that are kind of in the middle of the industry. But their brokerage production is very much in a small number of agents. Yeah. We wanted to leave a little bit of time. Obviously, we're getting kind of numbers heavy, but I don't think you necessarily have to understand all the statistics to get, okay, opportunity per agent is going up. That's something that's just good for just your own kind of inner drive and perspective on the industry as a realtor. But yeah, like Rex said, comments or questions? Anybody, feel free to unmute yourself if you're comfortable doing that, or if you'd rather type something into the chat bar. So I got about 10 minutes here before we transition. Tempted to type my own question in the chat bar and then answer it. I'm not above doing that. Now Natalie's daring me.
How's the space at BottleWorks coming along, Mark?
Curveball. It's a timely question, Natalie. So BottleWorks continues. For about 2 weeks there, they were saying like, hey, no delays. We're continuing on as normal. That's shifted a little bit now. The project hasn't stopped. They're still moving, but it's slowed down a little bit. We are projecting December 1st right now as open date for BottleWorks office. So that was October 1st last we announced anything, and it looks like December 1st now. So still moving along there, and you'll hear more about this in the near future, but it's actually fairly likely that our office is moving locations in the BottleWorks development to what we think is an even better spot. We like the spot that we have right now, but we're in communications about moving to a better spot, I think better, that's also slightly larger. So exciting news, hopefully coming here very soon. All right. That's really great. Rosie just seconded her own celebration.
So Michelle and I share one Zoom account, and when she signs in, she's also me. So some of you guys might have noticed that like it gets real confusing, and it does. So go see and tell.
I just switched my name so that it's clearer. My bad.
I like the thought of Rosie seconding her own celebration better. Yeah.
I'm like so tempted to flip you off right now, but I promised I wouldn't do that in any more Zoom calls. So gonna refrain.
There we go.
There you go. Yeah. Also, I just wanted to say that these number updates, like simplified number updates, are very helpful for non-number people like me. So thanks to both of you.
Yeah, I don't think it's the job of a realtor to, like, right, your service to your clients doesn't require that you know the nuances of like MIBOR brokerage rankings. right? So you can be really good at your job and never pay attention to these. We bring them up to give you a space to kind of get outside of the day-to-day and see what's happening in the industry, especially when it feels like it's changing so fast right now. And at a couple levels, we think it's just really good news what's happening. Like the trend is so good that it's worth celebrating. So thanks for saying that, Rosie. Okay.
Mark,
Yeah, Crystal.
I wanted to say something really quick to what Rosie was saying. It kind of goes with the Shift book, so I wasn't going to say it, but till later. But since we are in our business and most of us are not really big numbers people, usually our clients aren't either. And so what helps them a lot of times in tenseful situations like that is hearing examples. And so I think the numbers you and Rex put out should be encouragement for all of us that we are a big marketing tool for ourselves, because there's a lot of good stories of, even if I'm not doing business right now, then that means there's several other agents I'm attached to that are doing business that I can use their stories too. And people like to hear what is actually happening, like real life stories in their city that they can relate to. So it's nice that if you don't have your own situation, that you can borrow. I mean, you don't lie about it, but you can borrow and say, hey, someone in my office had blah, blah, blah just happened. And I think that is so credible, and it can give, we can give clients a lot of confidence with that, being able to share those kind of stories from each other.
That's great. Thank you, Crystal. Perfect transition. 5-minute break. Come back, let's say at 3:50. Crystal's going to kick off reviewing our next 2 tactics out of Shift. Crystal, thanks again for doing that. If anybody thinks of anything that they'd want to hear addressed about the numbers or anything like that, go ahead and drop it into the chat. And then maybe when Crystal finishes, if there's anything on there, we'll try to circle back to it. Dave, you probably noticed there in the chat, Rex did pull some of the numbers there. So that's all of Platt, average agent production of 1.6. Rex, I take it that is Tucker's North Meridian office average agent production. Is that right?
That is actual total firm.
Total firm, okay.
2019, and those are median numbers, not average, because I was trying to work fast, and that was the easiest way to export it out.
Yeah, you do like a ranking report.
Yep.
Dave, great. We will. We're working on the Indianapolis market share growth printed material. You should have that soon. I think we could do something. That's a good idea, Rex. We should do something as well on kind of average and median agent production to show kind of the width of Platt. So Dave, we'll get that to you as well. Okay, if you need a break, take your break. Crystal, I'd say at 3:50, take her away.
There's my Rosie. I have to see Rosie's face to feel good. Okay, so I'm pretty excited to, I liked both of these tactics. I extremely liked tactic number 9, a little more so, but before we get into it, I definitely want to encourage anyone. I love the fact that, in our time that we have together, and some of them, I just feel like it's good to keep the conversation going. That's what I've been doing with another Platt agent. So just a thought out there. But starting out with tactic number 9 on page 167, I just wanted to read the opening quote because I think it is so awesome to set up the whole energy for that chapter. But it says, if someone is going down the wrong road, he doesn't need motivation to speed him up. he needs education to turn him around. And I really like that because there's a time when we need to know how to educate, and there's a time when we need to have on a teacher's hat. And so kind of knowing and being able to identify when we need to put on different hats, because we do as realtors wear different hats with different roles that we play in the game that we call real estate. And so I love that. And I love the ability of kind of being able to identify what role we're in and what's the best hat to fit that particular role in that situation. And so to open it up, because I definitely want to hear other people communicate, if I had to look at a broad spectrum of chapter 9 or tactic 9 and make a broad statement just to bring everything in, it would be that buyer's consultations, they're important now. I always do them, but they're detrimental in a shift. Like I almost feel like they shouldn't even be an option. It is, it's very important. And the reason is because it allows realtors to put strategies in place as soon as possible, resulting in saving them time and money, where you can actually put these strategies that are given in this chapter, you can put them in place all at one time while building a rapport and relationship with that client from day one. And so one of the things I wanted to kind of bring up some of the strategies that you could put in place that he mentions and just get everyone's feedback, whoever wants to share. But before I do that, one of the key things I thought was really interesting too was the fact of what he said about a buyer's market, because I know most of us, including myself, have maybe never been a realtor in a buyer's market. And just the fact that he said that although the opportunity is very high, the urgency can be very low. And I'll be honest, before reading this book, that is not something I would have never described what I would think a buyer's market to be that way. And so it's encouraging on one hand to know, you know what, there is a lot of opportunity out there. But on the other side of that, it's like, why is the opportunity not being taken if it's not? And that's because of the urgency. And so that is not something right now, currently, we typically as agents have to really deal with, because urgency comes with it. Like you get a buyer, they're calling you, they want to go out and see houses right away. You have to slow them down sometimes to, do a consultation with them, explain the situation, like they're ready to go. And so I think that was one of the big mind shift things for me, is we have to be ready to understand that opportunity is there. It's just that the urgency is low. And so just wanted to cover 4 of the strategies and ask feedback from anyone who wanted to share their thoughts or anything. And these are strategies that it's mentioned in the book that I feel like would be great that you can do at a buyer consultation to establish right from the foundation of your relationship with this client. And that will be the drawing of the diagram when he talked about helping buyers to understand reluctance. When he had you draw the diagram, draw the line going down, asking, at what point do you think it's going to bottom out, level out, or whatever? I thought that was something worth mentioning, something that I took away that I would want to do. Understanding buyers' urgency, making sure they're able, ready, and willing. I think that is something that is awesome, because you can find out if you have an able, ready, and willing buyer actually during your buyer consultation. Because as he points out, if they're not willing, then you pretty much are wasting a lot of your time. And so why not find that out at the beginning if you can? The third one was establishing a rapport, building trust, and becoming their expert, where you can kind of show off a little bit of your skills in that. And the last part of that was finding their why, their wants and needs list, their motivation, which is my favorite one, because I'm big on that kind of stuff. The why is always a driver, and that is what can help bring that urgency. That is what can help keep a married couple from going at odds sometimes, even during showings and different things. So in any market. So I would love to hear feedback from anybody on their thoughts on those strategies that he had mentioned in chapter 9 of different things that if someone has something that they really thought they liked or something they had a question on or just anything. Unmute yourself and don't do me like you did Mark. I want to hear some feedback. Not texting, I want to hear you. So, anyone? Okay. So, I'll let you get your thoughts together.
All
Stephen,
right.
did I see you trying to say something?
Yeah. No, I'm just excited to use some of these and look at this stuff. I feel like this is all pretty common sense, but good things you don't really think about. And the way that he puts it together, I think it just kind of, yeah, it made more sense than it has for me before. So I'm excited to do some things.
Awesome.
Crystal, can you hear me?
Yes, Jenny, I can hear you.
I think I totally agree with you. I've been really trying to be very careful about setting buyer expectations, talking about multiple offers and how some things are kind of flying off the market and how we have to move quickly. So I think everybody's really receptive because everyone kind of can understand that obviously things are different in this moment. And then of course we're talking about safety and things like that, but I totally agree with you.
Awesome. Anyone else have a tidbit? For me, another big thing with this I liked is because for me, I was looking at down the road at what they're expecting our market to kind of change into. Because right now, you know, other than needing to wear masks and different things like that, safety precautions, I'm not experiencing so much of a shift. And it seems like most of us are not experiencing a big shift as far as in the market shifting over into a buyer's market. And so for me, it's more of a planning thing. What I was looking at with him is how I can get my mind shifted and prepared for as things, because whether it's, you know, the pandemic or whatever, we just from things that he has mentioned prior in the book, there's always this shift. It comes, it always does. I mean, it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. And so I thought these tools are very good because these are things that I just don't have to do right now with a client. They're just not needing to understand that really. But I love planning and I love the idea of having some strategies in my toolbox to know that as things shift, these are some things that I can do to prepare myself when I'm doing a buyer's consultation or whatever. And so before I switch over into the strategies for overcoming buyer reluctance, any questions or comments on the things I already mentioned, the drawing of the diagram? I am curious, did anybody the drawing of the diagram part, and I know some of us have not, some of you, obviously I had to read it, but I know sometimes we get on the call and we have not read that particular chapter already. And so I get that. I've definitely done that before, at least you're on the call. But was I the only kind of nerdy person that had a big aha and got really excited with the drawing of the diagram to help with reluctance? Because I'm a picture person, and I literally envisioned me doing that with a client and watching a light bulb go off in their head. And the reason that was big to me, if it helps you at all, is because I do understand that you can tell clients all day long or tell people things and it can make sense and it can be right. But the things that matter the most and that hold on the most to them are the ideas that they come to on their own, that they reach. And so for me, that was huge, because that would allow a realtor an opportunity with their client for them to have an aha moment, to on their own feel like they were in control of that decision, to say, oh my gosh, that's so true. Like, when is the bottom going to fall out? I won't know when the prices have hit their lowest until it starts going back up. And so me telling you all day long is one thing, but you being able to catch it on your own from seeing something like that was a big. So I kind of geeked out on that when I got really excited. So I'll be making drawings in my buyer consultations whenever this should come to fruition. But
Kristen.
the next part I wanted to share was, he started talking about the 4 different strategies of overcoming buyer reluctance. And with that one, he talks about like why waiting, why a client shouldn't wait, why they should move forward instead of trying to time the market out. Did anybody have any thoughts on that? Because I feel like I've never been in that situation, but I could totally see that being a big deal where people want to time things out. And I'm just curious what anyone else thought about his suggestions, his feedback on why that's a hazard and how we can communicate that. Anyone want to share on that one? Hi, Emily, connecting to audio.
Hi, Crystal.
Anyone? Okay. So with the 4 strategies he was talking about, was one being why wait, why you shouldn't wait, and the hazards of timing the market, of how that can be a hazard to that client. Also with the trade up, I love that, because we kind of have that now, but not so much. But with the buyer's market is when he gave the example of, if a client, because this was good to me because I'm a very realistic person, and I can totally see this being a lot of people's situation. So it might seem like a down market for them with selling, and they feel like, man, I'm taking a hit on the sale. But it's also nice to see that you may take, when he showed the diagram, you take a little hit on this end, but when you go to buy, you're also buying lower. And some things that are common sense to us, or it may feel common sense, we have to keep in mind they're not always common sense to a client, even if they're very intelligent. And so that would, I think, be a strategy that would help allow us to get both, instead of someone selling and not turning around and buying right away, but being able to do both. And then also the less is more, narrowing the field. So once again, I love that, because that is not something we have a big problem with right now. Right now, I know probably most of you are kind of like me, where your clients there's not a lot out there. Like, they can get through stuff pretty quickly. And so curious what you all were thinking about, because that's a shift in your mindset to have to think, what will I do when there's a ton? Am I just going to be driving around for hours and hours and hours showing 20 houses? Or like, how do I do that? And so I want to get your feedback on that, but I also want to share a story that I got. It's not a fun story. It's unfortunate, but it's the truth, of a realtor that I worked with at Tucker, that something that happened to her that was very unfortunate. She was working with a client, and there was a ton of they were seeing a lot of houses. They just didn't have things narrowed down. And she had taken them different places, all these different places. And finally they told her, well, we're thinking about building. And she told them, Well, maybe let's look at some more existing homes. Well, they went to a builder on their own, they were just getting burnt out. They were just getting tired of looking at all these different houses. They went to a builder, started up paperwork, got it going, did everything. She followed up with them. It maybe was a week at the most, a few days later or whatever, and asked them, hey, how are things going? And they were like, it's great. We decided to go ahead and build, and we're moving on. We're talking about $300-something thousand home. The only reason I found out about this is I happened to be in the builder's office when my manager at the time was trying to talk to this builder to convince them to let the agent get back in on the deal. So the builder, long story short, the builder was explaining to me that they were not allowed to let the realtor in. She lost out on that deal. And he said that basically the clients were just fatigued. They were just tired. She was taking, and she thought she was adding a good service because she was taking them to see anything they wanted to see. Whatever, if they said they were interested, she was running, and she is like the sweetest, highest energy, awesome realtor, and they just got wore out. And so my point with that, I took away from that and that I would want to share is sometimes left to their own demise, buyers don't really know exactly what it is that they want. And sometimes when we think we're giving our best service of just doing whatever they want, sometimes that is not the best thing. And for me personally, I have gotten out of several showings with clients explaining to them why I'm not going to do that, why I will not show them a lot of houses that when I've narrowed down and I see that they're not really the ones on their hit list. And so it was encouraging for me to see that he was encouraging that you're bringing it down because it just wears people out. And so anyone have some feedback or a comment regarding that they would like to share your thoughts on that? Because that can be a bummer. You think you're helping and turn around and you may be hurting yourself in that regard. Anyone? Okay, we'll keep going. And then the next one on there is finding a best buy. Getting while the getting is good, I think. Thank you, Rosie.
Oh,
It
Crystal,
really
someone
sucks
was
if you're
just
trying to
talking.
help and then you
Yeah,
help yourself
Crystal.
out of money.
I'll say something. Can you hear me?
Who is that? Emily?
You guys hear
Yes,
me?
Emily, I can
Yeah.
hear you.
Hi. I'll turn my camera on. Hold on. So you get the full effect. I think that hi guys. Guys, I got Starbucks today. And don't worry, Judah's dentist appointment. We'll talk about that later. So anyways, I think that to your point of like, I've had buyers in the past who are not sure what they want. And I think I don't know about you guys, but for me, I know when we're kind of like going down rabbit holes. And I think that because we want to be customer service oriented, we want to say yes. And especially if you're a new agent, you want to say yes because you don't want to lose a deal and you want to get business moving. But I think this time has made me really rethink how I navigate the search for my clients in terms of what am I looking at? How can I preview things? What can I look at so that I know that I'm going to present like a really great, few properties and my clients can trust me for me to say, yeah, that one's not for you because I've already previewed it or I know where it is or whatever. So I think that that's the value add. And I think because we've been doing a lot of virtual and digital showings or we've been doing previews on our own before taking people out, that's been really helpful. And so I think that I'm just rethinking how I'm doing that generally so that it can be valuable to our clients. I think also like my encouragement is if you start to feel that you're going down that rabbit hole, say no once or postpone once. And sometimes what you can be is like, you know what, I'd love to do that today. I can't do that today. And I'm not saying like just blow off your buyers, but what I'm saying is sometimes if you pause, I've noticed that it actually kind of naturally recalibrates a nervous or just busy buyer. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Em, I have a question about that, and it's really for everyone, but I'm curious, like, how often are you guys previewing houses? Like, what does that look like? And like, almost what's the purpose of that? Like, is that so you go in and, you know, you can come back to your clients and be like, shit, there's a really big crack in the foundation. Don't go see that. Or, you know, like what is the purpose of those? And how often are you doing them?
Don't.
So
Well, I haven't needed to do that.
you have I did them at the beginning of all of this because I had a couple buyers before we were under contract. And I think we all know photography is like, it can be the worst because you can
So
think it's going to be a
deceptive.
great house and you walk in and it's a nightmare or it's a bad flip. And like, there's sometimes that you can look at things and you're like, yeah, I'm not sure, but we'll go check it out. But I've had a couple clients. It actually worked in my favor, Rosie, because my clients were in Bloomington. And so I was previewing everything before they were driving up. But that it smells like a dead cat. Yeah, for sure. So I think that was helpful for me to just kind of rethink this whole thing, because it's way easier for me to hop in the car, and especially if I'm looking in Midtown, and drive for 15 minutes, go pop into a property, check it out and say, yeah, this is a quality product that I want. Like, I know what my clients are looking for. We've had those conversations. I can see a little bit of a vision here, because that's our job too, is to like help somebody imagine a space or be able to see kind of like the intangibles of a space. And so I've been able to do that. So it's been a lot of, here's a couple things that I've seen, or you send me what you think, or whatever, kind of either or. Scheduling like a 15-minute walkthrough, going in with my gloves and mask on, and, you know, just doing a quick walkthrough. Sometimes that's resulted in, hey, this house is great, I'm going to call you right now and show it to you virtually. And sometimes it's just been like, hey, I just previewed it, I think we should put this on the list when you come back in during the weekend or whatever, you know. Does that help?
Yeah, that's so good. I was having, months ago, I had lunch with a really high producer at Tucker, and he was saying that he like goes out and previews properties like every single day. Like, no matter if there's something that his client is interested in or not, it's just like part of his routine. He's like, yeah, I know the housing stock. Like, I want to know like what's out there. And I want to see every single property before my clients get in there. And I just thought that was so interesting. And I was curious, like, if that is part of y'all's practice. I think it's, a really interesting take that I hadn't heard before. So
I do think you have to be careful. Like, you can notice if somebody's living in a home, you can notice like those sorts of things. Like, I think that like, if that's going to be your practice, like, it's probably respectful not to like drive people out of their homes just so you can preview it if you don't have a reason, especially in this season. But it's vacant properties is the ones that I've been doing. Yeah,
that's great. Sorry, back to you, Crystal.
Oh no, you're fine. So I think it's worth mentioning how he wraps up this tactic, well, this chapter tactic, is by stating that creating urgency is a learned skill. And even though I'm a little bit of an anal planner, I honestly think that we've been given a gift with this book before a shift has happened. I do believe we're in a different, we're not doing business as usual, but I personally don't feel like we have hit a true shift. And so I really think we've been given a gift to get this book prior to that happening, as well as while some of us may have a little more time, because I do believe that there is going to come a time that these things will be detrimental to our business and these practices. And so understanding that it's a learned skill is great, because we have such great people we get to learn these things from. And we have time and opportunity to learn these different things, because they are things that we typically don't utilize in our current market right now. And so I think that is pretty cool. And the last words on there is, the first urgency must be yours. And so finding motivation within ourselves to have urgency is important, especially right now when you can be at home in pajamas all day. That can be that can be a little bit of a chore in itself, but just really finding the urgency within yourself first before you can expect to give. You can't give something you don't have. So before you can ignite urgency in a seller, and a buyer, we have to have that urgency ourselves. So moving on to tactic number 10, expand the options and creative financing. This was very interesting for me. I have a couple of opinions on this. And so for anyone who's had a chance to read it, I'm curious, would anybody like to chime in on thoughts, ideas, or questions in regards to some of the things that he was saying with the creative financing and some of the lending strategies? Anybody have something they want to share? So one of the things I will come to find, for me, even in this market, I know coming into a brokerage with a lot of high producing agents and some low producing agents that have just been around for 30 years or whatever, just a lot of people with a lot of opinions that have been around for a long time. It was very interesting how sometimes people wanted to become the master at being like being a lender, knowing all the lingo and knowing all the things. And I remember in training discovering, and I will always hold on to this, that it is not my job to be a lender or an appraiser or an inspector, any of those things, but it is my job to know a little bit, to know enough, and to be able to connect people with the right, connect my clients with the right people who are experts in that field. And so when I first started reading this chapter, I got a little nervous because it felt like he was almost trying to say like we needed to become lending experts. And I was very relieved when he began to make the comment that you do not need to become a lending expert, because there's a lot of different financing, different creative financing things that we typically, most of us anyways, it doesn't even get down to that. For us, we probably never even had to think about that or never heard of some of those things. And my big takeaways from this was, it wasn't that you still don't have to become an expert, but we definitely want to not just have the guy, your lending guy, your loan officer, but in a shift market, in a buyer's market, what I'm taking away is it's very important to know a couple different lenders, 2 or 3, that maybe do different things, because they're not all created equally. They're not all the same. And I love that for us within Plaid. I mean, I just saw, I don't remember, it was Diane or someone was just asking about a lender that takes a 580 score or something. And then we had agents chiming in pretty quickly, sharing, you can call this person, you can call that person, which I believe we are so fortunate to have the community that we have. And with all the experience with the agents that we're out there working, and the fact that there's so many of us working and not just the top producers, that there's more conversation to be had, and there you have more resources, more people you can reach out to, as opposed to maybe just the big hitters that maybe are not accessible to you. And so we really, 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 yes, Diane, I agree. We really, really, really are, we're really fortunate. And so it's good in any market, but when we go into the buyer's market, and Mark did not pay me to say this, it's for free, but I think one of the things that gives me peace of mind is where I'm at right now and being with Plaid. The size of it, just the culture, and the fact that we have so many agents, even the new ones that are still out there working, and they're meeting we have such a diverse group, as well as our customer bases are diverse. And so when you have diversity, that is important, because that is what he's talking about in this chapter with financing, because you may deal with a certain group of people But if we have a lot of different agents that are dealing with different dynamics, then once you hit that person or you come in contact with clients that are needing things that you're not used to them needing, you don't have to feel like you're just hitting a brick wall. That we really have a good pool of resources within each other to be able to go to each other. So definitely staying connected to each other. But my big takeaway was I do not like meeting with lenders. It is a very, very known thing, and I'm very blunt with it. But that's something I'm going to have to change as we shift into a buyer's market whenever that happens. Because I will need to know, Steven, free lunch. All you need is pretzels. You don't even need a whole lunch. And so I think that is important. I'm not saying taking up all my time meeting with a bunch of lenders, but actually being able to ask some different people like we do now, and then taking the time to get to know those people, those different lenders, finding out what they have. And lastly, looking into understanding some of these options he mentioned. Because I'll be honest, I'm a little clueless to some of those things. And once again, I feel like we've been given an opportunity that before you need it, you can get to know a little bit about it, at least enough to have a conversation. You don't have to get inundated with it, but at least to have a conversation. So let me check what these messages are. Besides Steven wanting lunch. Does anyone work in there? I had a seller ask for that. Okay, so Steven is wanting to know, does anyone work much in these areas with like seller financing and things like that, with the creative financing? So can we open that up? Does anybody currently do that or have people that they know that are good in those areas? Anybody that could take Steven to lunch is basically what we're trying to get down to. Are there any lenders out there that can take Steven to lunch? Let me check my time. Oh, good, perfect. So if there isn't any other thoughts on that, that is something that so if I could say 2 action items that I'm walking away with these. I know I've said it before, I probably said it twice, but sometimes we have to hear things like 7 times before we really actually hear them. So here's my other time. A lot of these things, I honestly do not believe we really need or would even be sensible where we are right now. But me personally, I'm going to take the opportunity that I have been given this book, and I've been given it in a time before a shift that I believe a true shift has taken place. Because when I'm talking shift, I'm talking beyond wearing gloves and masks. Like that's a different way of doing business, and that is important. I am not minimizing that. But as far as the shift that he's referring to, that is going to always happen, that it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. I'm taking away this opportunity to be able to walk away while I'm not overly inundated with a bunch of work, that I can start to kind of wet my palate a little bit with understanding some of this. And because I may not put it into place for a while, I'm just forever grateful for Platt providing this book with my highlights that I've put in it, so that I know it's a tool that when we do get to that shift, I can pull those things out, because I really believe that there are things that we're going to have to utilize. And so I think it's kind of pretty cool to have that and to be ahead of the game. But
Crystal,
does anyone have any other comments, questions, or anything? If you do, speak now or forever hold your peace.
Crystal, I got a question last night.
Oh.
A friend of mine is
okay. Rex took care of Steven.
Crystal, I got a question.
Anybody else? Mark, are you trying to talk? We can't hear you.
Yes. Can you hear me?
I can't. Can everybody hear Mark? I can't hear you. I can't hear him. Why can't I hear?
Maybe I could ask my question to Rosie, and Rosie could ask my question to Crystal. That would work.
Oh, there you go, Mark. Now, what did you say? My speaker was off.
Did you have me specifically on mute? You somehow.
That would be horrible. No.
A friend of mine who's on the very front end of getting his license, he's just starting his class. I was talking with him last night, and he asked this question, and you alluded to this a little bit, but I'd love to hear you talk about this. He said, Mark, the one thing I'm worried about is when a buyer doesn't want to buy a house. I am uncomfortable convincing them to buy a house. Like, I'm just not going to be able to do that. And it's interesting to me because the very first thing I said is, well, that's good. Like, that's because that's not your job. But what would you say to the, like, if what we're talking about is helping a buyer overcome uncertainty, that's a good thing. But yet convincing a buyer to buy a house who doesn't want to buy a house, that's a bad thing. Can you nuance for us and get at, like, what would you say to someone that's saying, like, well, hang on a second, we're not supposed to convince people to buy houses, right? So how does that differ from helping a buyer overcome uncertainty?
Mark, I really, really love that. So using what he said in the book and just things for me personally, that is definitely not our job. And that's a quick way to start not liking your job, because you feel like you're forcing people, and then you're going to have to stay on them the whole time, all the way through close, because there's all kind of loopholes for them to back out. If you're like trying to force them to do the contract, force them to do the inspections. And so I think the thing is to find out what their why is from the beginning. If someone's not willing, they have to be able, ready, and willing. And you find that out at a buyer's consultation. And so I would say to a person like that, once you find out that they're not really ready to buy a house, that is okay. That is someone you learn how to put them to the side, and you continue to go work with someone else who does, because it's not our job to convince, but it is our job to listen and provide facts. And in doing that, if some urgency is created, great, but you can't make someone willing to buy a house.
Yeah, the author of this book, Gary Keller, I listened to a podcast that he was a guest of a couple weeks ago. And I thought it was really interesting. Multiple times in the podcast, he said, I always work off of the assumption that I will never be able to convince someone to do something they don't want to do.
Yeah.
And I think it's a little simplistic. However, it's just, I like the fact that—
Oh my God, only because you like to Mark Nottingham people.
I like to convince people to do things that they're scared of doing that they want to do. Yeah. But I think that's a really great distinction, and that when realtors, if they view the profession as overcoming obstacles to get someone to do something they don't want to do, it's a cynical view of the profession, and it's not accurate. It's actually against license law. But that we do play a role of helping people overcome fear and uncertainty. And that those are very different things. So,
yeah, education is different from trying to convince somebody to do something. Big difference. Mark, I'm so glad you chimed in, buddy. Anybody else before we shut it down?
Guys, doesn't Crystal White just make you so happy? I could listen to her all day. Yes. Crystal, thank you.
Rosie.
Not true. Crystal, thank you so much. Your thoughts and words are like really important and really valued here. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Bye, guys. Have a good one. And congratulations on.
See you, everyone.